Perfection can look beautiful from the outside. Soft smiles, graceful posture, flawless manners, and a future mapped out in lace and diamonds. But perfection can also feel like a cage. For Daphne Bridgerton, being the diamond of the season wasn't just a compliment, it was a responsibility she never truly chose. From the very beginning of Bridgerton, Daphne is presented as the ideal daughter, obedient, kind, elegant, and marriage-ready. Society adores her. The queen crowns her. Suitors compete for her. Yet beneath the delicate gloves and rehearsed curtsies, there's a young woman terrified of disappointing everyone around her. Her obsession with marriage wasn't born from romantic fantasy alone. It was survival. In a world where a woman's security depended entirely on securing a husband, love was a luxury, stability was the goal. And when your entire value is tied to how desirable you are, perfection stops being optional. What makes Daphne's journey emotionally complicated is how little she actually understands about intimacy, power, and autonomy. Raised in innocence, shielded from truth, she enters marriage believing love alone will guide her. But ignorance in a patriarchal system is not protection, it is vulnerability. So was Daphne naive? Manipulative? Or simply a product of a society that shaped her into something polished but fragile? Let's break down 20 deeply emotional reasons why Daphne felt pressured to be perfect, and how that pressure shaped every decision she made. 1. She was raised to embody family honor and social perfection. Daphne did not grow up as just a daughter. She grew up as a symbol. From childhood, she understood that the Bridgerton name carried weight in society. Every smile she gave and every bow she executed reflected on her entire family. That awareness shapes a person deeply. When a child internalizes that their behavior impacts siblings' futures, pressure becomes identity. As the eldest daughter, she was the prototype. If she succeeded brilliantly, her sisters would follow easily. If she failed publicly, the consequences would ripple outward. That burden turns natural mistakes into catastrophic risks. She wasn't allowed to experiment with love. She had to perform it correctly. Being labeled the diamond intensified that dynamic. Public praise can feel suffocating because it creates expectations you cannot safely fall short of. The title elevated her, but it also trapped her in a polished image. Once society decides you are flawless, vulnerability becomes dangerous. Perfection stopped being something she aimed for, it became something she had to maintain. And when perfection becomes survival, authenticity quietly disappears. 2. Society conditioned her to believe marriage was her only purpose. Daphne's obsession with marriage did not come from shallow fantasy. It came from structure. Regency society offered women very limited pathways. No career. No financial independence. No socially respected autonomy. Marriage was not just romance, it was security. From her debut onward, every interaction revolved around her eligibility. Suitors assessed her as though she were a prized acquisition. Conversations centered on prospects, not passions. When your entire value is evaluated through desirability, anxiety becomes constant. She understood that beauty had a shelf life in that world. The longer she remained unmarried, the more speculation would grow. Was she too proud? Too flawed? Rejected quietly? The fear of becoming irrelevant likely haunted her. So her intensity with Simon wasn't just emotional. It was structural urgency. She needed to secure her future while she still held leverage in society's eyes. Marriage wasn't simply a dream, it was the only sanctioned form of stability available to her. 3. She feared becoming a financial and emotional burden. Even in a loving family, dependency can feel heavy. Daphne knew that without marriage, she would rely on her brothers indefinitely. That reality may not have been spoken harshly, but it existed. Remaining unmarried would mean lingering in drawing rooms while younger sisters moved forward. It could mean being quietly pitted or treated as a cautionary example. She did not want to occupy that space. This fear sharpened her determination. She wasn't chasing status for vanity. She was trying to avoid stagnation. She wanted to step into adulthood with dignity, not drift into social invisibility. Pressure to avoid burden often pushes people to make rushed emotional choices. Her urgency to secure Simon was partly about love, but also about avoiding the vulnerability of long-term dependency. 4. Control was constantly taken from her. Anthony's interference demonstrated a painful truth: even her romantic future could be negotiated without her full consent. Though protective, he treated her like fragile property rather than an autonomous woman. That dynamic likely made her feel powerless. Imagine being raised to be intelligent and charming, yet denied final authority over your own life. It creates internal tension. When Simon entered the picture, the fake courtship offered something intoxicating: choice. She chose him. She orchestrated the plan. For once, she wasn't simply reacting. But when someone experiences long-term restriction, they may overcorrect once they taste control. Her later actions, especially during conflict, reveal a young woman terrified of losing agency again. Perfection became her method of staying in charge of at least one aspect of her life. 5. She was kept ignorant about intimacy and power. Daphne's lack of sexual education was not innocence, it was systemic withholding of knowledge. She entered marriage unaware of basic biological truths. That ignorance left her vulnerable. At first, she believed love alone produced children. When pregnancy did not occur, she questioned herself. She wondered whether she was inadequate. That self-doubt likely hurt deeply. When she discovered Simon's intentional deception about conception, humiliation layered onto betrayal. She realized she had been shielded her entire life, and used because of it. Ignorance removes power. Once she understood the truth, anger replaced confusion. Her controversial decision in the bedroom scene emerged from that emotional storm. It was not careful manipulation, it was reactive desperation from someone who felt robbed of informed choice. 6. Romantic ideals created unrealistic expectations. Her mother's beautiful stories about love set a high emotional standard. Daphne didn't just want a respectable match, she wanted overwhelming devotion. She believed love should conquer trauma, fear, and resistance. When Simon resisted fatherhood, she interpreted it as a challenge love should overcome. Compromise felt like emotional failure. That belief made conflict harder to process. Instead of accepting complexity, she tried to push the narrative toward perfection. She wanted her marriage to justify the scandal, the risk, the urgency. When reality proved messier than fantasy, she doubled down rather than stepping back. Unrealistic romantic ideals often make people force outcomes rather than reassess expectations. 7. She internalized purity, motherhood, and sacrifice as identity. Daphne equated womanhood with purity, marriage, and motherhood. That was the script she was given. Becoming a mother wasn't just desire, it was destiny in her mind. When Simon rejected children, it threatened her identity. If she could not become a mother, who was she within that society? A duchess without heirs would be scrutinized. She also believed sacrifice proved love. She endured scandal, risked reputation, and emotionally invested fully. When Simon would not compromise, she likely felt her sacrifices were not reciprocated. This imbalance intensified her reaction. She wasn't just arguing about children. She was fighting for the version of herself she had been raised to become. 8. She turned Simon into proof of her worth. Simon's emotional distance fascinated her. He did not fall easily. That resistance likely triggered both empathy and competitiveness. If she could soften him, it would validate her romantic ideals. It would prove she was not just beautiful, but transformative. Loving him became a mission. When he refused fatherhood, she may have perceived it as personal rejection. Not just of children, but of her influence. That wounded pride mixed with heartbreak. Sometimes, we attach our self-worth to changing someone. Daphne needed their love story to confirm she was enough. Without that validation, doubt crept in. 9. Fear of scandal accelerated emotional decisions. The garden incident forced marriage under threat of social ruin. Everything happened quickly. There was no space to process feelings slowly. Rushed unions create unstable foundations. Her marriage began under pressure, not calm clarity. That urgency intensified emotional stakes. If the marriage failed emotionally, then the risk she took would feel pointless. That fear likely pushed her to fight harder to make it perfect. When public reputation is fragile, private problems feel catastrophic. She clung to the image of a fairy tale because the alternative was humiliation. 10. She confused security with control. Ultimately, Daphne's deepest pressure came from equating control with safety. When she felt powerless, socially, emotionally, sexually, she reacted strongly. Her controversial choice was rooted in panic. She believed securing pregnancy would stabilize her future. She mistook a forced solution for restored balance. Years of conditioning told her that motherhood equaled security. So when that path seemed blocked, desperation surfaced. This does not erase accountability. But it contextualizes her psychology. She was a young woman raised to believe perfection ensured protection. When that illusion cracked, she grasped for stability the only way she knew how, by trying to force the narrative back into place. Daphne Bridgerton was not simply naive, nor was she purely manipulative. She was shaped by a world that trained women to equate perfection with survival. Every smile concealed pressure. Every romantic gesture masked fear. Her controversial actions don't exist in isolation, they exist within a system that denied her knowledge and autonomy. When you raise someone to be flawless but deny them truth, mistakes are inevitable. The dark side of her love for Simon wasn't cruelty. It was desperation. Desperation to secure happiness in a society that offered her only one path. Perfection can create monsters, or victims. Daphne walks the line between both, not because she is evil, but because she was never allowed to be imperfect safely. And maybe that's the real tragedy of her fairy tale romance. It sparkled on the outside, but inside, it was built on pressure, silence, and the terrifying need to be chosen.